The next day we get into helicopters and we fly up into the Kashmir region to see where the aid was. So we're in 2 United Nations helicopters. And I'm looking out the window and I know we're in the wrong place because the Kashmir mountains are on the wrong side of the helicopter. And I'm responsible for these 20 journalists, me and a photographer. So we're like, okay, fine. So I'm bucking myself. It's one of these big helicopters. I walk up to the front of the helicopter and I see the pilot is a big Russian dude. I'm like, are we in the wrong place or am I just wrong? And he said, Nick, you see the 2 F-16s on the side of us? They're telling us where to go.
I am honored and excited to be here with Nick Layton today. Nick is an executive coach, and he's the author of a really interesting book called Exactly Where You Want to Be, A Business Owner's Guide to Passion, Profit, and Happiness. And he has a litany of people who are just thrilled with the book and your efforts. So Nick, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. Really excited to see where this takes us.
Hey, Mike, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be great.
So maybe just for context, let's talk a little bit about your book and your perspective, why the book exists and what you do for a living.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I started in client side for a large technology company. And that was fascinating. I was in their marketing department, did a lot of work around acquisition and getting customers on board. And that was great. And then I went agency side. And I ran an agency, which originally started in Dubai in 1999. And the reason I started it was because I couldn't find an agency to work for. So as in, there was an agency that could represent the company I worked for. So it was by chance. I was in the right place at the right time. I spoke to 5 of my friends who are all marketing managers of other technology companies. I said, hey, if I start this agency in the Middle East, it understands the Middle East, but it does things from a Western practice, would you use the agency? And 5 friends said, yeah. So I started the agency with 5 NASDAQ listed clients from day one. I was very fortunate. Yeah, and then by chance, within the next year, Dubai announced Dubai Internet City. And that drove technology clients to my doorstep. And I was the one shop that would specialize in technology. So I was very fortunate. We got to work with very large brands. So we grew up very quickly. Even though I came from the client side, I understood from an agency perspective, really what it took to help large technology clients, especially when they weren't in their home markets. So I'd say at that time, 85% of our clients were international brand names that you'd know today who wanted to be in the Middle East region. And we kind of helped them do that. And lead acquisition is different in every country, how we find customers, how we interact with customers. I think it's very diverse, even in the domestic market in the US.
Sure.
And I kind of took that feeling of how different things are in the Middle East, and we can go into it if we're interested, and kind of transform that into how to do things here domestically. So when I moved here, that made sense. That's where the book came from. And yeah, I realized that if you want to be successful, one, you've got to have passion for what you do. I was very lucky. I was doing what I loved. But then there were some other things pretty basic, but let's put them all in order and get it right. And then we can show big results.
So you went from 0 to 100 in a very short period of time, which is unusual. I think you'd find a lot of agency owners envious of that. Yet I know that it comes with a certain amount of turmoil, headache, and stress. So how did you do that? How did you navigate? How did you manage that? And what were some of the lessons you learned in the process?
So we were making it up as we went along. But we're talking 1999. So there weren't really established tools. This is back when, in fact, when I started the agency, I think people were still sending out press releases by mail with, those little film slides stuck onto them. It was kind of crazy. I think our media database was, a Excel sheet, which at one stage, I think I hired 2 people just full time just to keep up to date with emails and phone numbers of media people. It was insane. It was very much a we can do it attitude. That's really what got things going. It was that enthusiasm. And it was really listening. Because from an agency point of view, if you want to understand your client, and I think a lot of larger sales are this way, you've just got to listen to what they're saying. You can't push what you think the solution might be. So in the first few months of our agency, we thought we were going to be doing business plans. And we were selling business plans. But people didn't want to buy business plans. They actually said, no, we want marketing. We need connections with the clients. We need credibility in this region. We need to drive sales. That's what they told us. So that's what we started working on.
So it was a bit of a pivot for you guys internally.
Mhm.
figure out how to do that. As marketers, you kind of understood the objective anyways and how to get there. So it wasn't like you just stepped into the black box and had to figure this out in the dark.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it was a pretty significant pivot, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And in fact, back in those days, you'd go into the government to get a license to trade. And I sat in this office. It was like 100 degrees and one air conditioning kind of whirling away in the background. And the guy said, "So what's your business going to be?" And I said, "Well, it's going to be running business plans." And like, "Sorry, that doesn't exist. So you have to choose something else." I'm like,
So
"Well,
we don't have that one on the list.
yeah, right. It's not on the, and the book was probably written in the 1950s.
Right.
So he said, "But you could be management consultants." I'm like, "Well, what does that really mean?" He's like, "I've got no idea what it means, but it's in the book. And underneath management consultants is marketing and sales and everything." I'm like, "Okay, give me the management consultancy license." And that kind of gives us an idea that we could do anything.
So cut to 2017 when the book came out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All those lessons, all that learning, all of that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure it wasn't just a straight shot to success. I'm sure there were some failures and some hard-won lessons along the way.
Oh.
What were, and again, forgive me if I'm wrong, but what was the thing that caused you to think, I really need to write a book about this? Was there a moment? Was it just kind of an accumulated series of events, or was there some just kind of eye-opening moment in time you said, "I got to do this"?
It was a moment in time. And although we represented largely technology clients, we also did pro bono work. We did work for the United Nations World Food Program, which is one of the largest charities in the world. And when they came to us, they said, "We don't need more customers. Hey, we need more donations." I said, "Okay, well, we'll start small. We'll do like school painting competitions, get the local community going." And after a year or two of that, they said, "Well, this is great, but we need bigger. And here's our problem. Our problem is a lot of the aid that we have to give is in this kind of Africa, Middle East, going into Asia region, but most of our money comes from elsewhere. But there's money here. We know there's money in the region. It may not be in everyone's pockets, but governments, large organizations, they have the money. So how can we demonstrate that we're a worthy place to give money?" And at the time, it was something ridiculous, like, I don't know, $3 to feed a kid for a day or something. So it's like, any money would be great money, but they wanted the big money. They wanted the $1 million donations. So I said, "Well, why don't we showcase what the World Program does?" So our deal was we would find journalists from around the world and we would fly them to Dubai, and then we'd fly them on to where the aid was given. And we would have this juxtaposition. The first day would be glitzy 5-star, either in Dubai or in the city where we were. And then day 2 would be the poor, the aid being these kids who were malnourished, and how the aid was being used. So this normally kind of played with the journalists well. So we did one of these trips, and it was after a earthquake in Pakistan. So we were in Pakistan, and on day 1, we met the prime minister, the president, the head of the military police, and all these kind of dignitaries in Pakistan. We then went and had dinner in the Saudi Arabia embassy, and all these journalists from around the world. Some of them hadn't been to that region before. They were amazed. There was all this wealth. The next day we get into helicopters and we fly up into the Kashmir region to see where the aid was. So we're in 2 United Nations helicopters. And I'm looking out the window and I know we're in the wrong place because the Kashmir mountains are on the wrong side of the helicopter. And I'm responsible for these 20 journalists. Me and a photographer, so we're like, okay, fine. So I unbuckle myself. It's one of these big helicopters. Like, walk up to the front of the helicopter. And I see the pilot is a big Russian dude. I'm like, are we in the wrong place, or am I just wrong? And he said, "Nick, you see the 2 F-16s on the side of us? They're telling us where to go." And I looked over, and there were 2 F-16 fighters from the Pakistani army. And F-16s are really large and really scary when they're flying next to you. So at that moment, I realized we were being hijacked. And they put us down in this schoolyard. Our 2 helicopters, that's where they told us where to go. And we were surrounded by guns, men with guns. And we were put onto a back of a truck. And at that moment, I looked at our photographer who knew what was going on. And I said to him, "Let's just not tell the journalists what's going on at this stage. We'll keep it to us." And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, "And if we get out of this, we should write a book." And that was the moment. And we got taken a few miles where the Pakistani government or the military police was giving aid. And the journalists were given tea and cookies and shown around a little small part of the camp although I tried to get out of the camp and that wasn't going to happen. And after about 20 minutes, we were allowed to go back to our helicopters and continue the journey. So we didn't say anything to the journalist until after we'd delivered them safely home. So, by the way, that was an unscheduled stop, but that's how other organizations, in this case, the military police in Pakistan, got their publicity by hijacking our publicity.
Sure.
That was the moment.
Right. So there are a bunch of lessons in there. Interesting to me that your initial response to that event was, I'm going to go write a book. And that this turned out to be that one. Right. My initial response would have been, I'm getting out of this business and, going to go serve French fries somewhere or something.
Well, you know what? It was that point when I realized, sure, if I look back, it was a huge amount of danger. Anything could have happened. But I was doing what I wanted. I was living my passion. I was working with the media, which is what I wanted to do back then. It involved flying. I love aviation. I was giving aid to people who needed it. All these things came together, and that's what made it so powerful. That's where the passion came together.
So how does that translate into a book for business owners who are not necessarily operating in those kinds of environments? Exactly where you want to be, a business owner's guide to passion, profit, and happiness. There's a journey there. I was wondering how you can, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of illuminate, okay, I'm writing a book. These are my passions. How does that translate to what is now this book?
Okay, so right at the beginning of the book, we try and define what someone's personal vision is, not their business vision, but their personal vision. And that leads to a passion. So if you can really take the time to sit down and go, okay, well, why am I working? What's really important to me in my work life, but in my personal life, my family, my friends, my hobbies, maybe it's faith, whatever is important to you. Let's understand that, because that's where your passion is really hidden. And then through the book, we go through the first part, we go through a journey, which is kind of planning out. So you've got your personal vision, then you look at a business vision, and then you build a plan around that. That's the first part of the book. The second part of the book is how you do it. But it culminates in one simple thing, which is someone's champagne moment. So everyone who I work with, who I coach with right now, I know their champagne moment, the one thing they'd like to do personally in the next 1, 2, 3 years. So
can you give us some examples of what some of those champagne moments might be?
Absolutely. So for someone who's starting out quite new, that might be, I want to purchase my own home. For someone who's kind of in their maybe 40s or 50s, there's often events they want to do. They maybe want to go and live in Italy for 3 months, or they may want to go to the Kentucky Derby. They've never done that. Or they might want to go to the opening of an Olympics, normally sports or event orientated, or being in another country. I find people who are closer to retirement, they're saying, oh, I want to start building my my holiday home in a second country, maybe a country I originally came from. So there's a vast variety of things that you could be doing. But just having that one champagne moment, that's something that's personal to you. That gives you the passion to get up and do work. And so your business is kind of like the back wheels of a bicycle. And as you're in charge of that, and that's your power is connected to the pedals, and that's what moves you forward. But the front of the bicycle, that front wheel, that's your personal vision, is where you want to go to. And the two need to be aligned. Then it's like bicycling downhill with the wind behind you. You love what you do, and you're going to a destination that you want to be at.
Very interesting. I know, because I interact with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of high-level entrepreneurs. If you ask them in whatever phrasing you wanted to use, what is their champagne moment? What's their personal? I think that most of those folks would be hard pressed to give you an answer, because so many of them, us, myself included, it's a function of just putting your head down, getting it done. Here's my milestone, check that, find the next milestone, and start doing it. Right. And getting to the point where you can start identifying those really important personal goals. I think for a lot of people, and I'm maybe a hair transparent here, is really difficult.
Absolutely, it is. It's not an easy task. And when I start working with people, they don't have an answer. So it kind of takes the time to go through that. And that's why we kind of introduce it at the beginning of the book, but you don't find it until the end of the book normally. Okay. So, at the end, I like to say right at the beginning when I work with people, goals suck. Goals could be incorrect. There's no value in getting to the first or the next $1 million unless you have a reason behind that. And then it becomes interesting of how entrepreneurs change their business. So, once you know that really often people want freedom. They don't want to be working more than 60 hours a week. I have plenty who do. I work with plenty of people who love working 8 hours. A lot of people, they're like, no, I need freedom possibly for their family or for the other things which are important to them. So how do we structure businesses which are different? And maybe the next financial goal is not where we should be focusing. Maybe we should be focusing on trying to keep up our time more sacred. Maybe the team around you is more important. And people tell me many things which are important to them, adding to the local community, providing high paying jobs. All these things are really worthy and often more important than the next financial goal.
I want to take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about one of our sponsors. What could you achieve if you knew what your customers expected ahead of time? What if you could know what customers expect by category and by brand 12 to 18 months ahead of traditional brand tracking methods? And what if you could know exactly where to adjust and where to spend in order to derive the most benefit every time? A customer expectation audit allows you to identify areas that require strategic reinforcement, as well as pinpoint which values will contribute most to an emotional bond with your brand and optimize accordingly. Customerland has partnered with Brand Keys, the world's oldest loyalty-focused consumer research firm, to bring real-world customer expectation audits to brands, brand managers, and to CX practitioners everywhere. Want to know where your brand stands and exactly what to do about it? Go to expectationaudit.com. That's expectationaudit.com and download a sample audit today. Can you describe at all? Again, I don't want to give away the book. I want my listeners to go out and buy this because it sounds fascinating and super helpful. But can you describe some of those course corrections that some of your coaching clients have undertaken when it starts to become clear what they really want to go after?
Yeah, often there's really 4 things you can do in a business. You can increase your revenue by getting more customers, or maybe 3 or 4 other things. You can decrease your revenue. You can increase your team, or you can decrease your team. That's what it comes down to. There's all lots of operational stuff outside that. But one of the easiest course correction when I start working with people is they find out they're doing something in their business they don't enjoy doing. And they don't realize how easy it is to find someone else who might love doing that part of the job and to hand it over. As we start as entrepreneurs, we do everything. And we think we're the best at doing everything. So it's very difficult to let control go.
Is that universal? I'm just nodding.
I'm pretty sure it is.
So the listeners can't really see me nodding in accordance.
I haven't met an entrepreneur who is hands off yet.
Okay, good.
Because you have to learn. I mean, you can probably fix the printer better than anyone else can. So why give it away? I could run to the post office quicker than anyone else can. I can make way better coffee than everyone else. But maybe this isn't the best use of my time.
Right.
So often people, the admin side of things, the accounting side of things, people want to let go of that first of all. They're like, yeah, this is really not my expertise. As businesses get larger, we realize that people can normally be on one side of the fence. They're either very good operationally or they're very good on the sales and marketing side of things, particularly the sales side. And then there's a choice to be made. When you get to a certain size, you've got to bring someone else on to support you to be the other side of that fence.
I'm interested in that point in time, that kind of, I don't know, call it a crossroads, if you will, when it starts to become clear to the agency owner or the entrepreneur, whatever they're doing, that I guess first step is I shouldn't be doing everything, compounded by the fact that they probably can't do everything well. But when it comes to a delegation of responsibilities, that can be really difficult. And I know this in all seriousness from my own personal experience and having run an agency, having worked in other agency environments, that when you're the lead, it's all on you. And there's a certain pride of ownership there, which can easily translate to kind of control freak, maniacal, not letting go, and really enjoying the fact that you don't sleep. Yeah. So for your clients, where do those light bulbs start to go off?
Well, the sooner they go off, the better. But let's jump to today. As we record this in August 23, we are so lucky. The technology, the advancements that's happened in the last few years, probably driven by COVID and pandemic and other things, allows us to delegate and have freedom so much easier. So if you wanted to find someone, let's say you run an agency and you do social media, there is no need to have $25 to $45 an hour resources here domestically doing all your work. You may well want to keep your account managers who are client facing doing that work, but how can we more efficiently and more effectively get the work done? And today, the workforce is global. We can hire anyone, maybe project-based, maybe freelance-based, maybe full-time, but they could be anywhere in the world. And therefore, we can use the advantages of probably being domestic and finding people who are not that rate. $7, $8, $9 an hour resources exist who can do fantastic work. So how do we let go? How do we do that delegation? At the beginning, I tell people to use the 80-20 principle. Now we know the 80-20 principle, right? But we change around a little bit. 10% is you setting up a project. That is the teaching someone or the briefing of a project. 80% is them doing the work, and 10% is you knowing you have to check it and bring it up to the right standard. Working with someone right now, and he says his agency is particularly good at polishing the pearl, getting the work back and spending that last 10% on it to make it fantastic.
Interesting. Outsourcing is a thing now. And I think, with the advent of AI, 6 months ago, we all, were completely blown away, and I still am, by ChatGPT and its successors. And, outsourcing brought certain efficiencies, but I think AI, generative AI in particular, is going to bring a whole new level of efficiencies that especially people who are on the production side, if they'll get past their fears of losing my job, becoming outsourced, whatever the fear happens to be, can find themselves sitting on top of a pile of work that has never been more efficient to execute.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And there's, as an entrepreneur or a business owner or a manager, there's two ways to look at this. So first of all, you can say, okay, I'm paying someone $45 an hour domestically to do something. If I properly utilize technology, AI, I could train a $7, $8, $9 an hour resource to do the same standard. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it and is the people who are here, who are working, how are they learning AI? How are they bringing AI into their jobs? So I'm not going to say that a $45 an hour resource is going to be the same productivity in the future if they can use the resources available, if they can adapt with the AI technology. They could be way more productive, and therefore there's a very solid reason to have them as part of your team.
Let's talk for a minute about the kinds of people, of businesses that would probably find the most value working with someone like you. What, if you could define it, what would be the sweet spot of the type of customer that would derive the most benefit out of Nick Layton's services?
Well, I think it's the same for any coach. The entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, managers who do best with coaching, first of all, they have a mindset that they don't know everything already. That's the first thing. And that's common that I see everywhere. But ultimately, they're trying to achieve one of four things. They either want more profit coming in, or they want more sales, two different things. They have a problem with people or processes. That's a challenge for them. They need to leapfrog to become more productive. And the last one is they're looking for more freedom. So coaches, I think, can help in each of those four areas: revenue, profit, people, processes, freedom. That's really what people come and talk about, their challenges. And then it's that accountability that really drives you forward. So, and it's not that I'm unique, many coaches will work this way, is they'll start with someone and they'll meet every week or so for the first 3 months. And that really gets the plan going, that gets them in the right direction, that gets KPIs set up, all that kind of stuff. And after that is maybe twice or 3 times a month, where we're holding that accountability. We're seeing what's next. We're looking at risks. We're looking further down the road. And it takes that longevity, because people are really good at coming up with excuses for not doing things. And one of the stories I tell is, before COVID, when I used to go and see people far more, I walked into one office, and the owner of the business said to me, I love my personal assistant. She's fantastic, but she's been here for a long time. And every year I've given her a pay rise. And now she's costing more than I should pay for her. And I said, well, what do you want to do about that? And there's multiple options. And he said, well, really, I should let her go. Even though I love her, she's great, but she's costing too much for the role. She doesn't want to move to another role. So the decision was she was going to leave. So I went back the next month and she was still there. And so I went and I said, she's still here. She let me in. What's going on? And he's like, well, there are reasons. I'm like, look, just be open with me. Are you having an affair with her? Is there another reason why you haven't let her go? He's like, no, nothing like that. I'm like, okay. So I said, are you going to commit? Next time I come in and see you, she won't be here. And he said, yeah, absolutely. The next month I turned up. There she was again. Now she's on the phone and she is arranging for her kids to go away to summer camp, which I know is pretty expensive. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I walked in, I said to my client, I'm like, so where are your kids going for summer camp this year? He's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, they're not going to summer camp? He's like, well, it's kind of expensive. And, you know what our finances are like. Maybe they won't go this year. I'm like, so your kids are not going to summer camp and her kids are going to summer camp. She was gone the next day.
Okay.
But it comes back to that. What's important to me?
Well, when you boil it down to a bottom line equation, when there's finances involved, when you can prove out an ROI, so to speak, things become, there's a amazing clarity comes in moments like that.
Right. Exactly. So that accountability is really vital. Someone needs to find the right buttons to push for things to happen.
Interesting. So we talk a lot about the agency world, agency life, entrepreneurs. Are there other sectors, industries, categories you think that would benefit from the work you do?
Actually, there are, and I don't just work with agencies, although I specialize there. So I work with a number of different organizations, and my marketing agency also works with all kinds of not just technology companies. Well, it's the changing landscape of who's being employed right now and what's there. So, the generations have different amounts of people in them, and we're finding that those boomers are pretty much retiring. Gen X's are coming in. There's some interesting dynamics going on there. So I think within larger organizations, you're seeing the guard being passed on, if that makes sense, to some younger people. Yep. And some older people may not like the way that the younger people do things. There needs to be some kind of translation. In fact, even last night I had a conversation with someone, he's got to be in his 60s, and he has about 120 people working for him, reporting directly into him in a very large entertainment business. And he's like,
is that the whole company, 120 people?
No, the whole company would be much larger because they're international, but his team's 120 people. And he's like, I can't get over how 50-minute breaks turn into 45-minute breaks. I can't understand why if you say this has to be done by tomorrow, it'll be 2 days later. He hasn't got that. And it used to be you could just tell someone to do something and it would get done. And that's clearly not the case anymore. So when we're talking about internal operations, there's definitely some coaching that needs to go on. There's accountability that needs to be taught. And that needs to be throughout an organization, or at least through a department. So there's some coming of understanding that needs to happen there. So there's quite a lot of coaching that we'll do around that, how to communicate between different generations, how new managers should communicate as well. That's not something that you're born with, like accountability. No one teaches you accountability. And in fact, if you're an entrepreneur, you probably have never worked with someone who's really good at accountability. So how would you just know how to do that?
Well, worse, I resist it. And I've gotten good at resisting it.
Right, exactly. Right. So holding other people accountable is just not a natural thing.
Right.
So organizations are built on this shared trust. That's what it comes down to. So there has to be this two-way trust that goes on. That's difficult to set up. So a lot of coaching we do is in that area.
Interesting. I'd love to have further conversations on this to talk about it, because it has to start with an individual who's willing to change, who's accepting change, and will actually pursue that. But ultimately, what I think you hope for is that becomes cultural within the organization, and it's not just one person leading that charge. But
absolutely, and not only so, there's something interesting with teams, but it's also exactly the same in sales. Generally speaking, there are 4 types of people out there, and you've got to identify what kind of person you are and what kind of person you're talking to. So, when we've had conversations previously, it's easy for us to have this communication because we have a similar communication style. But there are other people out there, and you know who they are, where it's slightly harder to to communicate with them. And if you can identify that type of person and you can change to it, it's easier to build a team, but it's also much easier to sell.